Welcome to the deep dive. This is where we take sources you send us and really get into them.
Exactly. And today we're tackling that AP World History Unit 5 review someone shared, focusing on, well, a huge period, 1750 to 1900, the Age of Revolutions.
It really is vast, isn't it? Covers the Enlightenment, nationalism, the Industrial Revolution. It's a lot.
It is. But, the goal here is to kind of trace the big threads, how the Enlightenment sparked new ideas, how nationalism reshaped borders, and how industry just transformed everything.
How they all weave together. That's the key, I think.
Precisely. So we'll look at the Enlightenment's ideas, then the revolutions and nationalism they fueled, then dive into the Industrial Revolution, its start, spread, technology, how governments reacted, the social impact, the whole picture.
Okay, let's start at the beginning then. The Enlightenment. The review calls it an intellectual movement. What's the core idea?
Well, it builds on the scientific revolution, but applies that same logic, rationalism, empiricism, observation and reason to human society.
So thinking critically about government, rights, religion, not just accepting things as they are.
Exactly. It's a shift in authority, really,
Right.
from external sources like the church or tradition to internal human reason, asking, does this make sense? Rather than just, is this tradition?
And that had big implications for religion's role in public life, didn't it?
Oh, definitely. You see thinkers questioning established churches. Deism emerges this idea of a creator god who doesn't, intervene daily.
Down a clockmaker god.
Sort of, yeah. And even more radical views like atheism gained some ground, challenging the very existence of God. It forced a reevaluation.
And out of this questioning came some foundational ideas for modern politics. Individualism.
Right. The focus shifts to the individual as the basic unit, not the tribe or the kingdom. And tied to that is the concept of natural rights.
Things everyone is born with.
Yes. Inherent rights. John Locke is key here. Life, liberty, property. The idea is these aren't granted by a ruler, they just are.
Which must have huge implications for how you view government.
Absolutely. It leads directly to the social contract theory.
Okay, what's that exactly?
It's the idea that governments get their legitimacy, their right to rule from the people they govern, the consent of the governed.
So power flows up from the people, not down from God or a king.
Precisely. And crucially, if the government violates those natural rights, becomes tyrannical,
Or the people have a right to change it.
or even abolish it, that's the radical part. It directly challenges absolute monarchy and the divine right of kings.
Wow. Okay, so these aren't just philosophical ideas floating around. The review says they led directly to major revolutions.
This is where the ideas hit the ground. The American, French, Haitian, Latin American revolutions, the review links them straight back to Enlightenment thought.
It's not just swapping rulers, it's changing the whole system based on these new principles.
Exactly. Rejecting old traditions, asserting popular sovereignty, often defining a nation in the process. And, the successive one, like the American Revolution.
Could inspire the next one.
Thank
The
you.
domino effect.
Absolutely. It provided a tangible model. And these revolutions, in turn, really boosted the idea of nationalism, the sense of shared identity, and the right to self-rule.
But the Enlightenment's impact wasn't just those big revelations, right? The review mentions other changes too,
True. Things like the gradual expansion of suffrage voting rights.
though often limited at first, like just to white men with property.
Yes, very limited initially. But the principle of broader participation stemmed from those Enlightenment ideals of liberty and equality, even if it took a long time to unfold.
And the abolition of slavery. That seems directly linked to natural rights.
It is. The Enlightenment provided strong intellectual arguments against slavery. How can you have natural rights if some people are property?
So moral arguments combining with other factors.
Right. Economic shifts played a role, and importantly, resistance by enslaved people themselves, like the Great Jamaica Revolt mentioned in the review, put immense pressure on the system. Britain abolishing the slave trade in 1807 is a key marker.
And serfdom, too. Its decline seems connected.
Yeah, the end of serfdom in places like England, France, eventually Russia, partly driven by economic changes with industrialization needing mobile labor, but also influenced by Enlightenment ideas about individual freedom and peasant uprisings demanding rights.
We also see the beginnings of feminism here. Calls for women's rights.
A really critical point. The Enlightenment's logic of equality and rights inevitably led some to ask, what about women?
Like Mary Wollstonecraft.
Exactly. Her vindication of the rights of women argued passionately for equal education, saying women possess reason just like men.
And Olympe de Gouges in France. pointing out the hypocrisy of the revolution's rights of man.
Yes, her Declaration of the Rights of Women directly challenged the exclusion of women, and later you have events like the Seneca Falls Conference in the U.S. in 1848.
Organized by Stanton and Mott, demanding suffrage.
Right, a landmark moment for organized women's rights. So, while the revolutions didn't deliver equality for all, the Enlightenment provided the tools to demand it.
Okay, so that sets the stage. These ideas are out there, fueling change. Let's talk more about nationalism itself. The review calls it a relatively new thing.
Yeah, this intense feeling of commonality based on shared culture, language, history, territory.
Hmm.
It wasn't the primary identity for most people in earlier empires. Loyalty was more to a ruler, a religion, or a local region.
So people start identifying as French or German in a new political way.
Exactly. Believing that people who share that identity should have their own independent state. It's a powerful unifying force, but also divisive.
How so? The review mentions states using it, but it backfiring.
Well, a state like the Russian Empire might try to impose Russian language and culture to unify its vast territory.
But that could just make other groups, Ukrainians, Poles, Finns, feel more distinct and resentful.
Precisely. It could breed counter-nationalism, strengthening their desire for their own self-rule instead of assimilation.
And this desire for self-rule, mixed with those Enlightenment ideas like popular sovereignty, that sounds like a recipe for revolution against empires.
It absolutely was. Political dissent against monarchs and distant imperial rulers was a major cause. People started questioning why they should be ruled by someone foreign or someone who inherited power.
And Enlightenment ideas gave them a language for that dissent. Democracy, liberalism.
Yes, popular sovereignty, democracy, liberalism, these offered alternative ways to organize society based on the people's will and protecting rights.
Let's look at the Atlantic revolutions again through this lens. The American one, they already had some self-governance, right?
They did, largely due to distance. They had colonial assemblies, managed local affairs. But when Britain tried to tighten control and impose taxes after the 7 Years' War?
No taxation without representation.
Exactly. That slogan is pure Enlightenment thinking applied to their situation. The Declaration of Independence is full of Locke's ideas, and its success was hugely inspirational.
Then France. More complex, more internal upheaval.
Definitely. They'd helped the Americans, so the ideas were circulating. Plus, they had huge internal problems. Debt, inequality, a rigid class system.
So it exploded more dramatically.
Much more radically. It aimed to tear down the whole old order, monarchy, aristocracy, church power. The Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen proclaims liberty, equality, fraternity, though applying it was messy.
And Haiti. A revolution led by the enslaved. That's incredible.
Truly remarkable. Saint-Domingue was France's richest colony, built on horrific slavery. But the enslaved population heard the revolutionary talk from France.
And applied liberty, equality to themselves.
Yep, exactly. Led by Toussaint Louverture, they fought and won independence. Haiti became the first free black republic, a massive blow against slavery and colonialism.
Then the Latin American revolutions.
Yeah.
A whole continent. Similar drivers.
Very similar. Enlightenment ideas spreading among the Creole elite people of Spanish descent born in the Americas.
They resented control from Spain and Portugal.
Yeah, being excluded from top jobs, economic restrictions, and then Napoleon invading Spain created a power vacuum, a chance to break away.
And leaders like Simon Bolivar used Enlightenment language.
Absolutely. His letter from Jamaica is full of Enlightenment ideals about self-government. They fought for and established republics across South and Central America.
But nationalism didn't always mean a full-blown revolution, did it? The review gives other examples.
That's right. Sometimes it manifested differently, like the propaganda movement in the Philippines.
Filipino students in Europe advocating reform through writing.
Yes, absorbing nationalist ideas and using education and publications to push for change from Spain, which eventually fed into the actual revolution.
Or the Maori in New Zealand resisting the British.
The New Zealand Wars, that was Maori nationalism trying to preserve their sovereignty against colonization.
And Lola Rodriguez de Tio in Puerto Rico, using poetry.
Her poetry, like Labor in Kenya, became a symbol of resistance against Spanish rule tied to both independence and women's rights.
We also see unification movements, Germany and Italy.
Right, where nationalism wasn't about breaking away from an empire, but about bringing together smaller states with a shared language and culture into one nation, often involving war and diplomacy.
And the Balkans sound like a real powder keg of competing nationalisms.
Definitely. Serbs, Greeks, Bulgarians, Romanians, Albanians, all seeking independence from the Ottoman or Austro-Hungarian empires. These overlapping claims created huge instability.
Leading eventually towards World War I.
It was a major contributing factor, yes. And interestingly, the Ottomans themselves tried to create an overarching Ottomanism identity.
To hold the empire together.
Yeah, to foster loyalty across different ethnic and religious groups, but it mostly failed against the stronger pull of ethnic nationalism.
Okay, so while all this political change is happening, there's another huge transformation underway. The Industrial Revolution.
A complete game changer, starting around 1750 in Britain, shifting economies from farming and crafts to factory production. It fundamentally altered global power.
Why Britain first? The review lists quite a few reasons. Seems like a perfect storm.
It really was. Geography helped lots of coastline, rivers for transport and early power, plus crucial resources. Coal and iron were abundant and near each other.
And they had an empire for raw materials and markets.
Yes, access to global resources was key. Then there were changes in agriculture.
Better farming techniques, new crops like the potato, leading to more food.
More food meant population growth. And things like the enclosure movement pushed people off farmland, creating a labor force for cities.
Plus legal protections for property, encouraging investment.
Right. And, crucially, capital. Wealth accumulated partly from the Atlantic slave trade was available to invest in factories and machines. It all came together there.
And this led to the factory system. How different was that?
Radically different. Production moves from homes and small workshops into large buildings. Mass production using machines.
Like the water frame, the spinning
No.
jenny, powered first by water, then steam.
Exactly. And it used a different kind of labor, often low-skilled workers doing repetitive tasks, easily replaceable.
Steam power seems like a major accelerator.
Huge. James Watt's improved steam engine meant factories didn't have to be by a river anymore.
You could build them anywhere.
Yeah.
Your coal fields near
Yeah.
cities.
Right. And then applying steam to transport steamships, trains just revolutionized everything. Goods and people could move faster and further than ever before.
Connecting regions, connecting the world. The Suez Canal is mentioned too.
Yeah, 1869 dramatically shortened the sea route between Europe and Asia. Steam power made these massive infrastructure projects viable and impactful.
But industrialization didn't happen everywhere at once, did it? It was uneven.
Very uneven. Whether a country industrialized quickly depended on having those key factors. Resources like coal, waterways, or railroads, capital, a stable government supportive of industry, a labor force.
So a gap opened up between industrialized nations and non-industrialized ones.
A huge gap, yeah, in wealth, in military power, in global influence.
And the review notes a decline in manufacturing in places like India and Egypt.
That's a major consequence. Traditional industries, Indian textiles, shipbuilding, ironworking, couldn't compete with cheap British factory goods.
Often helped along by British colonial policies.
Yes, colonial policies often deliberately suppressed local industries to benefit the colonizer. It caused a major shift in the global economy, away from Asia and the Middle East towards Europe and later the U.S.
How did industrialization look in other countries that did manage it? France, for example.
France was slower than Britain. Less coal, more political upheaval initially. But they made progress, especially with government support for things like canals and railroads. Less social disruption than Britain, perhaps.
And the United States.
Rapid industrialization, especially after the Civil War. Huge natural resources, growing population through immigration, political stability. Workers generally had a higher standard of living than in Europe, though conditions could still be tough.
Russia seems different, state-driven.
Very much so. The Tsarist government pushed industrialization, building railroads like the Trans-Siberian, to catch up militarily and economically.
But with harsh conditions for workers.
Extremely harsh, which led to significant unrest like the 1905 revolution.
And Japan, another state-led effort.
Yes, but defensive. The Meiji Restoration saw Japan deliberately adopt Western technology and industry to avoid being colonized like China.
And they succeeded pretty spectacularly, didn't they?
Amazingly quickly. They became the major industrial power in Asia by the early 20th century, a unique case of rapid non-Western industrialization.
Let's talk technology. The review distinguishes between a first and second industrial revolution.
Right. The first phase, roughly late 18th to mid-19th century, is dominated by coal, steam power, iron, and innovations in textiles.
Watt's steam engine, locomotives, steamships.
Exactly. Then the second industrial revolution, later 19th century, brings new power sources like oil and electricity.
Oil leading to the internal combustion engine,
Yeah.
potential for cars.
Yes, and electricity powering factories, homes, Thomas Edison and the light bulb, plus electric streetcars, subways.
And new materials and processes, steel, chemicals.
Huge advances. The Bessemer process made steel cheap and strong, essential for bridges, skyscrapers, better railroads, ships. Chemical engineering brought synthetic dyes, vulcanized rubber for machinery, belts, and tires.
And communication tech, the telegraph.
Samuel Morse. Instant communication via Morse code. Laying transatlantic cables connected continents in near real time. A massive change.
What were the effects of all this new tech spreading?
It opened up interiors of continents. Railroads like the transcontinental in the U.S. or the Trans-Siberian allowed settlement and resource exploitation far from coasts or rivers.
Made countries feel smaller, more connected internally.
Yes, and globally too. Trade exploded. Steamships and railroads made moving goods cheaper and faster, and it fueled migration.
People moving from farms to cities for factory work.
Massive internal migration, but also huge international migration. Europeans moving to the Americas, Australia, South Africa, seeking opportunities created by industrial expansion.
But industrial life wasn't easy, was it? The review talks about harsh conditions and calls for reform.
Not at all. For the working class, it often meant incredibly long hours, very low pay, dangerous factories and mines, child labor, really brutal conditions.
So people started demanding changes.
Absolutely. You see calls for political reform as more men got the vote. Working class parties emerged demanding better conditions.
Social reforms, too. Like workers organizing themselves.
Yeah, mutual aid societies, early forms of insurance, and educational reforms. Compulsory schooling started to spread, partly to train kids for more technical jobs in the Second Industrial Revolution.
And cities needed fixing. All that pollution and crowding.
Desperately. Major investments began in sanitation sewers, clean water to combat disease like cholera that thrived in overcrowded industrial cities.
And labor unions become important.
Crucial. Workers realized they had more power collectively. Unions organized to bargain for higher wages, shorter hours, safer workplaces.
They grew quite powerful in some places.
Yes, membership grew significantly. Sometimes they became major political forces like the Social Democratic Party in Germany, pushing for reforms, some inspired by Marxist ideas.
Let's talk about those ideological reactions. Marxism seems key.
Very influential. Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels analyzed capitalism as a system driven by conflict between the owners, the bourgeoisie, and the workers, the proletariat.
They saw it as inherently exploitative and unstable.
Exactly. They believed history was a story of class struggle and that capitalism would eventually be overthrown by a workers' revolution.
Leading to communism, a classless society.
That was the theory laid out in the Communist Manifesto in 1848. Scientific socialism, they called it. A powerful critique that resonated with many facing industrial hardship.
Now, how did non-Western powers like China and the Ottoman Empire try to deal with this industrializing West?
It was a huge challenge. They saw the West's growing military and economic power. China, after defeats like the Opium Wars against Britain.
Fought over Britain wanting to sell opium in China.
Right. China's defeat showed the power gap. They tried the self-strengthening movement, adopting Western tech, especially military, but keeping Chinese culture.
How did that work out?
Not very well. Too much resistance from conservatives, not comprehensive enough. Their defeat by industrialized Japan in the 1890s really showed its limitations.
What about the Ottoman Empire, the sick man of Europe?
They were losing territory, economically weak. They attempted more thorough reforms, the Tanzimat reforms.
What did those involve?
Building some factories, adopting Western-style laws and courts, secularizing education. More aggressive than China's efforts.
Were they successful?
More so than China's, perhaps, but still not enough to halt the empire's decline. There were internal divisions, too, like the young Ottomans pushing for a constitution, then conservative backlash. Ultimately, the empire couldn't fully modernize or hold itself together.
So industrialization created massive societal shifts, too, new social classes.
Absolutely. You get this large industrial working class, often migrants from the countryside, doing tough, low-skilled factory or mine work.
Conditions were bad, but maybe better pay than farming.
Often, yes, which is why people moved. But life was precarious, dangerous work, crowded slums, disease, and then you have the growing middle class.
White-collar workers,
Mhm.
managers, doctors, lawyers, teachers.
Exactly. They benefited hugely from industrialization. More comfortable lives, access to consumer goods, a sense of upward mobility through merit.
And at the very top,
The industrialists, owners of the big factories, mines, railroads, they accumulated immense wealth, often eclipsing the old landed aristocracy in power and influence.
How did industrialization affect women specifically?
Differently depending on class. Working class women often had to work for wages, usually in factories like textiles or domestic service. Families were often separated during the workday,
And middle-class women?
increasingly confined to the home, the separate sphere. Their role was defined as domestic, managing the household, raising children, being the moral center of the family, less involvement in the economic world outside.
And the cities themselves face huge problems, right? Pollution, housing.
Massive problems. Coal smoke choked the air. Rivers were polluted with industrial waste and sewage. London's Great Stink is a famous example.
And housing couldn't keep up.
Not at all. People crammed into hastily built tenements, often lacking basic sanitation or ventilation. Disease spread rapidly, typhoid, cholera.
Crime was also an issue.
Yes, concentrated poverty often led to higher crime rates. Theft, violence, often linked to desperation and alcohol abuse in these tough urban environments.
So looking back at this whole period, 1750–1900, the review stresses both continuities and changes. What stayed the same?
Well, despite industrialization, large parts of the world remained primarily agricultural: Russia, China, India, Africa.
So farming was still dominant globally.
For the majority of people, yes. And social inequality persisted. Aristocracies still held power in Europe, caste systems in Asia, and huge wealth gaps existed everywhere, even in industrial societies.
Global trade relied on colonies for resources.
Absolutely. Colonialism continued and even expanded as industrial powers sought raw materials and markets.
But the changes were profound.
Undeniably. How things were made, the factory system, mass production, completely transformed. The whole economic system shifted towards global capitalism, free markets, new financial institutions.
Urbanization changed the face of society.
Dramatically, cities swelled, new classes emerged, urban life presented new challenges, and you got reactions, labor movements, calls for reform, new ideologies like socialism and communism.
Migration patterns changed globally.
Huge shifts driven by industry and empire. People moved within countries and across oceans on an unprecedented scale.
And the spread of industry itself created a new world order.
Yes, dividing the world more sharply between industrialized nations and those primarily supplying raw materials, often creating dependencies.
So wrapping this up, it's clear that the Enlightenment, nationalism, and the Industrial Revolution were deeply intertwined forces that just completely reshaped the world in this century and a half.
Exactly. They drove political upheaval, created new nations, unleashed technologies that changed daily life, and restructured societies in fundamental ways.
But it wasn't a simple story of progress. Lots of hardship, inequality, conflict, alongside the innovation and new ideas.
Absolutely. It was complex, contradictory, full of tension. Which kind of brings us to a final thought for you, the listener.
Yeah.
Think about how the echoes of this era, 1750 to 1900, are still with us. The political ideologies, the economic systems, capitalism itself, the nation-state model, even our relationship with technology. How much of our world today was forged in that period of intense change? What legacies do you see around you?
That's a great question to ponder. And on that note, that's our deep dive for today. Thanks for joining us.